Times.
Um, uh, yeah, it started like back in 2017. That's when I wrote the short film for Baghead. I was living in London at the time, and I was part of a filmmaking group. We didn't have a lot of money to make short films, which is the case for a lot of short filmmakers. So we were kind of coming up with ideas for that could be set in one location. And I got my heart set on the idea of finding a pub that might let us rent their cellar or their kind of back room or whatever. So that was the first idea to come up with the location. And then I thought about what's happening here, and I came up with the idea of someone visiting a medium or a psychic. Um, and we've seen these kind of things before. People, they bring a little memento and they use that, and the psychic, channels the voice of the deceased person. And just at the time, I was like, well, we've seen that before, and I thought, well, what if she just eats it and turns into the actual dead person? It was a really good idea. We wrote that. And then I met Alberto. I didn't know Alberto at the time, but we met through social media. He was looking for a project to direct. Met with him. He really liked the short script. And we entered into a competition in London held by Shorts TV. They're a TV channel that broadcasts a lot of short films, and they were given a little bit of money for a script to be made. We put that in, and we won the funding, and we went away and we shot it in London at the end of 2017, and we had it on the festival circuit for most of 2018. And people responded really well to it. We won a bunch
Oh,
of awards, a lot of audience choice awards. People really got into it. So the name Baghead was out there, and one day we were contacted by some producers from Hollywood. Said, we've heard about this short film. Can we have a look at it? They liked it. Said, we want to take it out, see if anybody's interested. And yeah, finally found a home with Studio Canal, and it went from there.
wow. So when you were getting to that stage with film festivals and starting to get recognition and success, did you ever think it would get to this point where it would actually be made into a movie?
I mean, we knew it had potential. In the actual story, there's like, yeah, you can do a bigger story. Some short films, it's just, it's just a short. And we kind of thought, well, there's potential here. Um, I mean, you never really know what's going to happen. Lots of short films can get optioned over the years, but you never actually see them developed into feature films. These things happen all the time. But we yeah, I mean, you never really know what's going to happen. So we didn't think too much about that. We just focused on, once we get onto the fest, we focused on making the short, getting it out there, and whatever came after that was a bonus.
Okay, so was it hard to expand upon making it into a movie from a short?
It's, I guess, with the story, it can go a million different directions. If you could put the short film in front of 10 different screenwriters, and they're going to give you 10 different directions to go. Um, I mean, it's as hard as any other feature length script to write. You just have to find the right idea, and obviously there's ideas of budgets in mind, so you can't go too far in one direction because that's just not what's going to be made. So it's just kind of getting the right idea that fits in with the budget. And I mean, I guess if it works out in those two capacities, then there's no reason
Sure.
it can't work.
So when it came to your short story, when it came to like preserving the original ideas of that, do you feel like it translated well into a feature length film?
I think so. It's um they're two different animals altogether, a short film and a feature film. I think they both serve their runtime and what they're doing independently. I mean, you can't lose anything from the short because the short is just, it's contained, it's there. So
Yeah,
all you can do is add on to it. So I don't think anything was really lost per se. It's
mm,
the core of the idea is there, and now it's just embellished for a 90-minute runtime.
sure. So I don't know if I'm just looking too much into this, but when I was watching the movie, I noticed how often you would see alcohol, and it seems like it was getting to be an addiction for them to talk to their loved ones.
Mhm.
Was that intentional, or am I overreaching?
You know, I guess that was just a kind of a lucky thing that worked out. It was never at the core. I didn't like choose the pub and alcohol and as addiction as a theme. It was just more of a an interesting physical location. And as more I thought about it, I felt like, well, when people do after funerals and they lose a loved one, they tend to go for a drink. So it makes kind of sense of all the locations that this creature could be, that you would go down to the basement and you would have your meeting with the creature, and then you would go upstairs to drown your sorrows or whatever your feelings may be. So I think we just kind of got a little bit lucky there, but it makes a lot more sense. I mean, you're not wrong to see it there, but it's yeah, it is there.
I love the setting of the cozy pub. That's yeah, it reminds me
Yeah,
of home.
it's I felt, I guess it's kind of, I kind of like the idea of this old supernatural creature set in a slightly modern thing. She's not like up in a castle out in the forest.
Yeah.
It feels like she's living five, because I was living in London at the time. It feels like there are pubs in London that are quite old with basements that are quite old, and kind of think, yeah, 10 doors down the road from me on my street, there could be a shape shifting witch, really.
Yeah, so I'm a big Stephen King fan, and when
Mhm.
I was watching this, I couldn't help but think of Pet Cemetery.
Yeah.
Did you draw any inspiration from that?
Not specifically Pet Cemetery. I guess, I mean, when I came up with the concept, I was like, okay, the first thing I did was Google to see, because I thought it was a pretty neat concept. I was like, maybe somebody has already come up with this, and I couldn't find anything. So I was like, okay. And what I like about Baghead, it's slightly different in the sense that you're bringing back people right up to the point that they died with their memories intact. You know, we've seen movies before where they channel spirits, but the spirits know they're dead.
Yeah.
So they have memories that they formed since they died up to the point that they're summoned, where these people are just brought back from the point that they actually died. So it's a much more intense kind of situation. But I didn't pull specifically, but yeah, once I came up with the idea, I was like, well, yeah, Stephen King's done this before. I think when you're a writer of
Yeah,
supernatural, someone has always kind of done something similar before. So
of course. Yeah.
yeah.
So I feel like Baghead is actually a very unique monster. Is there any inspiration that you drew for it? Because I haven't seen anything like Baghead before.
I like I said, once I came up, it really was just taking the concept of a medium and going a little bit further,
Sure.
um, rather than just have hiring an actress, an elderly actress, to change her voice of the deceased person to physically transform into the dead person. I just, yeah, when I came up with it, I was like, I don't think I've seen this before. The magical side of things, as far as the aesthetic, the bag on the head, that was more of I guess it came to a more of a budgetary thing, because I was like, okay, I really like the idea of that this being is 300 or 400 years old, but that's going to be very complicated prosthetics that we probably couldn't do at the time. So I
Of
said,
course.
well, what if we kind of hide her under all this, the bag on the head and the baggy clothing, and we just hint at what's underneath. So that's kind of, I mean, I guess it's, yeah, it was more of a budgetary thing that I was kind of hiding. Um, and that kind of helps because creates a bit of mystery because you never really know what's under there.
Okay, so last question. When you were writing the story, was it important to you to have those themes of grief, to have that emotional sort of weight to the story?
Um, I think I'm attracted to stories that have there's a monster or a supernatural element, but it's more about the people around it. And I feel people respond to it a little bit better. That you have this thing and it could be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you use it, that kind of way. So I think we just, in this particular situation, I think grief is always going to tie into any
Yeah,
sort of story about resurrecting the dead. Now, of course, if we resurrect the dead and it's a nice situation, that's not very dramatic. So it's
no.
naturally going to be you're resurrecting the dead, but there's a bit of conflict there. So I think, yeah, anything to do with bringing the dead back to life, you're always going to be touching on themes of grief. Yeah,
Absolutely. Well, thanks for taking the time to speak to me. I really appreciate it.
no worries.